Well, welcome back to the shop. It's been rainy here. Everything is just humid. So I haven't really been able to get started on any of the paintwork. So I had basically a spare day or two here and some spare metal. So I thought I would try cranking out some kind of slimline or like a 1-inch Fender extension. They just clip on. They actually had them in the Japanese market starting in like 1980 for the FJs, but they are kind of a part that you just don't really find. I'm testing them out because now is the time to try doing some of this stuff. You're not going to scratch the paint and do anything like that, so it is the time to play around. And they would give a little extra clearance. I'm going to throw those 255 VFGs on here, which are going to be a little bit wider than the 235s, I think. So they're a little bit wider, a little bit taller tire. This will just give a little bit extra protection from some of the stones that throw. Like MTs are pretty good at throwing gravel up on the panels. Should give at least a little extra coverage to some safe flat panels. They do also kind of add a nice little look. They kind of complement the front fenders a little bit, give a little bit of shape to this flat panel. Like I say, the nice thing is they're just clip-on. So if you want to pull them off, you can pull them off. They should not hurt the panel whatsoever. So if you don't like them, they're really awesome. I cranked this one out the other day. It's scratch built at all, flat panel, beaten on with a hammer. So we're going to do a little bit more of that today. I kind of got a template to work from now, so it should go a little bit faster, a little easier on the camera. Let's get the passenger side here done, sitting pretty good. I'm going to take some of that leftover steel and do the same thing, crank out the driver's side. And we'll bring that on for the ride in case there's anything interesting that comes out of it. So let's get making the partner with this guy. Onward. And just before I pull it off, to give you a little better idea what we're working with, it's basically got a 45-degree bend here. I use just a piece of round bar. It's actually a drive shaft out of an Evinrude 175 outboarder. It was kind of a leftover from our lower unit that went bad. Use whatever tools you got. But like I say, it's a 45-degree bend. Got a curve to it. It's about a 3/4 inch radius on that bend. And then it sticks out just a little bit under an inch. So just enough to give you a little extra clearance without sticking way out. Kind of a subtle flare there. Otherwise, it does sit pretty good. I need to fine tune it just a smidge. And I think it will probably get a slice of that double-sided 3M body panel adhesive tape. You can kind of pull that off with fishing line and one of those gum wheels. So it is an adhesive tape, but it's not going to hurt anything. If you want to pull it off, you can pull it off. Kind of like they use for decals, badges, etc. But otherwise, sitting pretty good. It's got a slight taper as you come down, so it's thinner here. The main meets up here. Likewise, there's a taper as you come down the front. It narrows down. You got kind of a consistent, I don't know, 1.5 inch vertical face here, and then same deal, tapers on the way back. If you look on the inside, it's basically, again, probably about 1.5 inch lip here, so that covers up the amount you're sticking out, as well as it rides on the rolled lip of the fender as it goes inward. Basically, it's a couple pieces here, and then you have to do. I don't have a die or a press currently, so you've got to kind of do a little bit of pie cuts and welding and seaming there. So it's fiddly work, but it's kind of a good exercise to work on your metalworking skills and just kind of do a little bit of the old way. A lot of times we look for the easy way out, and really they don't take that long even doing it the old-fashioned way of kind of bending flat steel, seaming it together, shaping it. So it's kind of fun to make some panels from scratch, work on the metal skills, and get something good out of it. So I'm going to pull that guy off, use it as a template, and start to get working on that driver's side. It's going to be a mirror image, so it's kind of nice to have the shape to work from versus trying to wing it like I did for this guy. So apparently we're sponsored by Coke today. This was the template I used to do this guy. It still does meet up. Just made sure it didn't slip or anything with the tape. So we're going to use that to get a mirror image for the driver's side will at least get us in the ballpark. What I'll probably do then is lay that piece on here and use that to fine tune it to make it match. We'll check to make sure that the driver's side is actually consistent. Never can tell. But this will give us a rough idea of what we need from the steel we got. And I did take and trace the shape now that I know what I need as well to get me a little better idea of where I can lay it out on the panel. When I did the first one, it was kind of a whatever fit. But now I know exactly kind of the shape we're going to have to repeat it. So we can trim this guy down a little bit more. And then again, it'll be another one of those ones where this will get us in the ballpark. And then once we've got it cut out of the flat sheet, we can lay it on that other passenger side flare and make it match, which should actually make the other side go a little bit faster as well. I've got a known shape to work from. Let's see what we got. Look at that. I'll be. So I got this guy cut out, used the flap disc to get it kind of within the final shape. Pretty close duplicate of the passenger side flare, enough that it's, they're sitting on different sides of the vehicle right next to each other. Gets us right in that ballpark. Should give us the radius that matches the fender well, and it'll give us the radiuses that match the flare shape that I did on the passenger side. I did cut out another piece, bend around the wheel lip, so that gives us that flange that goes under the wheel lip and out for the flare. We'll have to lay this on the vehicle. We'll get this clamped on, and it'll give us some shape. We'll tack this against it, which stiffens up this panel so we can work it. Oddly enough, you do need to remove those tack welds when you're done. What I found by doing the passenger side was if you tack everything together and make it a box, it's very stiff. And there's not a lot of wiggle room for getting it to fit on the rig. The tub itself isn't perfectly flat all the way. It's got a little bit of shape to it, and there's a little bit of variance. And then as you weld this up, you end up do a little bit of variance. It's hard to keep it perfectly in line. And because of the way I'm making them, when they come off the vehicle, you can't just weld them in place. So you need a little bit of give. And what I found is if you leave it as a C-channel, you can actually get a little bit of this this kind of warpage, which helps you fit it on the rig. Versus if you box it, you may get a little bit of a twist in it, and then it's really hard to get it to sit flat. Even with 3 sides bolted on the floor, it's plenty stiff and stout enough that you're not going to see a real flex or anything. It's tucked up and tight in there. It's really not going anywhere. So it's just like a tickle as far as making it so it fits. You do need a little bit of this wiggle in order to get it sit right up the rig, because the likelihood of getting it as a removable flare and fully boxed and everything, you would need some sort of a jig. It's just not worth it because I think it. So let's get this strip bent up on the rig. We'll get this set on and we'll tack it on, and that'll give us some shaping up on the bench, and then we'll start getting some facing. That'll do. So like I say, we're just going to tack this in a few spots just to give this lip a little bit of support while we work on it. Once we get the sheet metal that goes from top to bottom here into kind of a C shape, we can nip those spot welds out and give us a little bit of flex to work from. Because what happens is this does twist and bend a little bit as you work on it, because it is, I tend to assemble it off the vehicle. So you do need a little bit of play there. But this will just let us keep this radius at least close enough for what we need. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just need something to hold it in shape. The more pieces we get on there, the better it is. So I've got to wheel the old welder over, get it zipped on, and we'll throw it back on the bench. So got her pulled off back on the bench. Got the passenger side one laying there. Use that as a reference to just mark off where I had straight sections versus pie cuts, just as a reference point for myself as I'm working on it. It does make a difference a little bit as far as how I radius that and where I was using straight sections versus not. So I had a long straight piece kind of running up this edge, stopped right about here. Had about a 7-inch section of pie cuts to get me around this radius. Long straight stretch here, probably about a foot. And then a little shorter on this side, probably a 6-inch section of pie cuts, just a little different radius front to back on the fender well. And then a little shorter chunk on the back for this taper. I do need to taper taper that guy down as I work it. I need to remember to do that as well, which should give me a pretty good reference as far as replicating what I did for this guy, because how it was put together did kind of drive the shape just as much as the shape drove how it was put together. So gonna dig up some 18 gauge. So I used 18 gauge for the face. It's a little easier to get this radius bent and shaped a little bit better. The 16 was just a little thicker to have better support on the flanges and where it met up, where you could use it. So I'm gonna go root around in the steel pile, see what I got, see if we can get some bent up, and start. I think last time I started with the 2 tail pieces and then worked my way inward tails. So I'll see if I can find some pieces that fit that and start to get them bent. This is just a piece left over from, I want to say, doing the rear doors. Just some 18 gauge. I know I need to get to about here, and I know I need to get to about here. Oops. So I'm just going to line up the chunk. Go get him, buddy. He's giving her. I'm just going to lop that off. It should give me enough for this piece. And if I'm careful, get a little bit closer. I actually have enough to do the other end. So careful, we should be able to keep this piece for this end, which would be good. Not that it's pretty good for eyeballing it. So this is just what I've been happening to use that gave me a decent thing to get a radius out of. It's actually a drive shaft out of a lower unit for Evinrude outboard. The lower unit went bad, and it was the replacement had the longer drive shaft for the deeper lower unit. But it's a decent hardened steel. It's the shape I needed. It was laying in my scrap pile. So put her to work. Does the deed. So pretty decent. Little bit of a taper to it, but this one's going to get trimmed, so not too worried about it. It's going to get cut at an angle for that to be a little thinner on the bottom. So that'll do. The soft hammer and the bar gives you a pretty decent radius. You know, there's no crimps or kinks or anything in it. It's pretty straight. So does the deed. A little bit odd, but work with what you got. So last time what I ended up doing was going from the point at this corner to basically where the radius of that fold stopped, just to give it a taper. So roughly like that, which brought it down, but still had a little bit of depth to it down here. Okay. Should give it a pretty decent piece there, and then we'll have to trim this flange back to match that taper because it's obviously full length all the way through. This will give us at least something to go from. part in here. So got a pretty decent fit there. This taper matches pretty good with the taper we got in here now. Matches down to the corner. It sits pretty decent. We'll need a little bit of trimming on this end, but that's fine. Not the end of the world. So I'll get it down to the corner where we want it. Get it sitting flush where we want it. Give it a couple tacks to hold it. If I don't jiggle everything around and get it out of shape again. So got it roughed in, starting to look like a Fender flare, like you'd expect. Just got it trimmed close, just to get rid of some of the excess, so when you work on it, you got a little more working room. Just a couple tacks holding it, but all in all, shaped in pretty good. You can see how it kind of matches what we did on the other one. A little bit of hammer work to do there, just to get that corner to sit down the way it's supposed to. It'll get cleaned up as you grind it. But one piece done, 20 to go. Other side's going to be basically the same. Center section's going to be the same, and then we'll work in these pipe cuts. So, back in a bit. Well, just got her clamped in with one little vice grip clamp. Microphone was unplugged for the last bit, so if there's a Dennis Taylor voiceover or a time lapse, that's why. But all in all, I've got this front. Ooh, she is still warm. Got this front tacked up. It's got a nice taper to it. Fits the corner pretty well. Comes down to the tub line. This all sits pretty good. Still sitting on the flange. Back corner sitting pretty good as well. Got a nice little taper to it as well. Kind of mimic the other passenger side one. So making some progress. Got a nice working shape to go from. It's a little faster with the shape known. You can kind of bang it out a little quicker than the other side. When I did the passenger side, moving slow today, I had originally done the pie cut up to the top, and then that let me figure out how tall I wanted it here. I may do that again because it worked. It is a little bit easier to just keep working through and have, filling in a hole is a little bit harder than continuing a line. So if I did this middle section first, even though I know what it's going to look like, then I have to fill in two corners versus if I just work my way forward. It's probably a little bit easier that way. So it's probably what I'm going to do. Keep chipping away. I'll put in some plugs here. We can do a few pie cuts, and then we'll probably cut to the old YouTube Speedo Vision, either a time lapse or a cutscene, just to speed things up. Because it is slow work. It's not the end of the world, but it does take a little bit of time. But all in all, kind of nice having this side looking more like a Fender flare. I do think I'm going to run them. We'll see as we keep chugging along. It's nice to have options, and it's fun to learn to do something new. So let's get this back off. we'll keep filling it in and see what we get. So, took a piece of that 1 inch, well, it's about 1 inch, just cleaned it up, took it over on the piece of round bar, bent it. It's funny, you can actually get pretty good at eyeballing the 45 and how long to make it, where you can kind of wrap them up pretty quickly. I'm just going to leave this guy straight as a starter, and in this case, when I did the other side, I kind of had to eyeball it and use your best judgment as to what looks good. This time I'm mimicking, so it should go a little faster. But in this case, I'm just going to trim this guy back because he's kind of the wrong shape to bring it forward. We'll get a square guy in here to start bringing that corner around. And then the next one we'll cut into a pie piece. You can kind of alternate a little bit around square pie, or kind of continue to do like this and keep cutting that edge on the back side. This is a little bit easier because it's held in place, but it's just kind of a do what looks like it's going to work best. So we'll get this guy cut out, we'll get this guy tacked in, and kind of just keep rinse, lather, repeat. Well, there it is, all tacked up, fit together. Pretty good replica of the driver's side, passenger side, other side, one of the sides. Sits pretty good, tucks up along the rear. Arches came out all right. I'm going to need to weld it all up. Obviously, it's just tacked together right now. But otherwise, sits nice against the body. The second one is a little bit easier. I kind of learned what to do and what not to do on the other side. And there's just less guesswork because you know what you're trying to aim for. When I was doing the other side, it was a little bit of, let's see what works. But otherwise, pretty happy. I'm going to have to pull it back off, throw it on the bench. Just wanted to do some fitment checks. But even as it's tacked together right now, it is sitting pretty good up against the body. Pretty good clearances there. And it is kind of end to end is a pretty good distance, so sometimes when you're working it you can get a little bit off on the ends. I had to redo the other side a little bit, but this one the tails are meeting kind of good right where that body flare goes. So all in all, pretty good there. Pretty happy. They're not a wide flare by any means, but I really didn't want them to be. It's just enough to catch some stones and stuff. The 255s are going to sit out just a little bit, kind of flush with the outer body, so this should help trap a little bit. Let's get that pulled back off. We'll throw her back on the rack, start welding it together to kind of finish some of that up. It will need a little body filler just to smooth everything out that last little bit when you're done, both sides, but they're stiff, they're stout. It's going to be real, just a whiff. So anyway, let's pull them off. Let's get back to work. There we go. Well, I got number 2 knocked out. So passenger side, driver's side, turned out pretty good. They're pretty reasonable inverted duplicate of each other, which is good. I'm sure the fender wells themselves aren't exactly the same on the rig, but in general I got the same shape, taper, yada yada yada, so pretty good there. But otherwise knocked them out. Did a little bit of both on the MIG and TIG. It was good to brush off the TIG, kind of get started working on that a little bit more. It actually would have worked better, but due to the shape of the piece it was a little bit harder to get good ergonomics, and I don't have, as you can see, I don't have a perfect workbench here, so the ergonomics get a little funky, and for a newbie it helps to have the workpiece in a little bit better positioning. So ended up sending a lot of it home with the MIG, but the TIG was definitely a good little experience. Both of them are cleaned up, blasted. They will need a little bit of body work just to, where these come around the corner, just to get them nice and smooth and perfectly, rounded. They are, pie pieces, which isn't going to be perfectly round, so a little bit of body filler and some block sanding is going to smooth them right out, which is fine. But all in all, pretty happy. Like I mentioned earlier, the only real trick that I found working through them to get them to fit right, if you do something like this, I ended up, on the second time around, I used very sparing spot welds to get this flange where I wanted to. And then once I got things kind of in place, I cut those flange welds, or spot welds out. And then, I'm not sure how much you'll be able to see it, but I took the body hammer and kicked this flange in so it's crooked. So basically there's a little bit of a bevel here, which just gives you a better clearance when you're fitting it up on the rig. You want this outer lip to ride tight, and this really doesn't matter. So if this is off on the inside at all, it's going to hold your outer lip out, which is noticeable. So if you release those spot welds, you can bang that in to give it a little bit of a bevel or a chamfer, basically, which helps on fitment. And then the other piece, which I'll see if I can get you guys to be able to see it, by releasing those welds as well. So this piece, if you look, it's basically free. Let's get you clipped in. Yoink. We'll have to get you fairly close, and you may not see. So if you look at that mark, if I twist the tails basically like this, like you were fitting it on the vehicle, by leaving that free, you can see how that, by twisting the tails, you need that movement to be able to shift back and forth. So that's the other kind of trick specific to kind of the fender flares. Ooh, come on up. So what I was doing there was flexing these tails. By leaving those welds out, you can actually get a decent amount of flex. Once you tack those down, you can't move them at all, because basically you've created a box. So leaving those welds loose, in this use case, right, you do need a little bit of that flex to get it to sit real nice on the vehicle, because these were intended to be removable flares. I don't want to modify the tub for something that's kind of, even though these were available OEM, it's nice to be able to kind of pop them on and off-ish and not modify anything. So Vims they are. And here they are, just tossed back on the rig. I've just got a couple clamps, nothing fancy. Sit pretty good. They're not a real wide flare, kind of intentionally. They're only about a 1-inch. Just enough to catch some of those stones coming around. I'm not running 12-inch meats on the back. They're going to be 255 70 17s. So just a smidge wider than what we got. But all in all, sits pretty nice. The shape's kind of nice. If you look, they do a pretty good job of mimicking the front and rear, which is kind of, I think, what factory intended. It's kind of funny, if you watch, there's a video out there where Chip Foose talks about doing a design on the FJ40, and he's like, I wouldn't really change a whole lot of it at all. I think he pulled the front blinkers and added some flares to the back, basically, and said, like, they just did a good job, so don't mess with it, which is kind of neat, kind of a nice tip of the hat to the Toyota engineers back in late 50s, early 60s. They did do a pretty good job on a pretty timeless design there. And ironically, it's kind of similar here, just threw the fenders on back. Just mainly to catch the stone throws, but it also does add a nice little visual character to the back versus the flat tub panel. Just a little smidge of shape. And here's the driver's side, same deal, came out pretty good. As expected, second flare went a little bit faster. You kind of know what you're doing and you know what you're getting into, and well, you know what not to do, which is usually the learning experiences, figure out what not to do more than what to do. But all in all, came out pretty good. Like I said, they do need a little bit of body putty just to smooth out those corners. You're making a round piece out of square flat stock. But all in all, it's pretty good. I think they'll mount up pretty decently. So pretty happy. We'll see whether or not I use them or not. I think I will. Worst case is you can pop them back off if you don't like them. I'm going to be painting anyway. So now's the time to do the paint. They'll be body matched color, which helps again with kind of the OEM, a little bit less aftermarket. You know, they're not going to be like big black plastic fender flares. They'll be body color. They don't stick out real far, so they should be pretty transparent. Holy moly, get out of the way, friend. So that's going to wrap it up for today. Quick little project, side project. Oddly enough, it's going to be 30 degrees now after this week of rain. We got snow in the forecast for Thursday. So the weather's just been, it's like when you put your snowblower away from the air and you know it's going to snow. It's been time to paint, and the weather just hasn't really been conducive to it, but that's all right. Gave me a chance to knock this out. Perfect time to do it. You know, you're not going to scratch any of the body work. You can really kind of get it fitted right. Went a little easier than I expected for doing a kind of total custom radius shaped. You know, you've got curves and curves and curves. Went pretty good for working for flat steel. So anybody out there that is thinking about anything like that, give her a go. It's how you learn. You're really not out to lose much. The steel's probably $10. You screw it up, throw it in the scrap pile. Like I say, went better than I would have guessed going into it, and I'm pretty happy with how they came out. They'll work. If it works, is it wrong? Yeah, I think they'll work. So looking forward to throwing some paint on them, seeing them when they're fully done. But all in all, hopefully it gives you some idea of what it takes to at least try and do some custom fab. Like I say, I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. I definitely haven't done this before. It was just me hammering some sheet steel. Give her a go. Hopefully you found it interesting. I didn't cover any of the welding, grinding stuff as much. If you look back at the video on the hardtop, there's plenty of that in there. Plus the back doors had plenty of that. So same deal as far as kind of finished weld, grind, same jazz. So if you want to see some of how that goes, check out the hardtop and ambulance store videos. They've got her in there. This should be the last of my welding and grinding, though. It'll be interesting to put the welder and grinder away. And I'm gonna trade it for block sanding and paint gun, but that's part of learning. It's fun to do different stuff and kind of cover the soup to nuts. So anyway, that's it for today. Hopefully you found it interesting. Hopefully it gives you an idea what it takes. Maybe it'll convince you to bite off and try some new things. But thanks for riding along. We'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one.